Hey, welcome back to the 100 Movements podcast. My name is Brian. I'll be your host today. And in a minute, we'll get to meet Ben Connelly. But first, I just want to kind of set up today. Normally, when you arrive at our podcast, I say normally, this might be your first episode. That's fine too. We spend most of our time in some teaching series, working through frameworks and practices and stories that help the church rediscover a movemental imagination, at least in the West. The Global South has a good handle on it. But every once in a while, we're going to do some different things. And today is one of those days where we get to interview an author and a practitioner who's helping equip the church by returning to Scripture, returning to the story that we see there, and to the sending heart of God. So really grateful to be joined by Ben Connelly, who's a pastor, an equipper, and an author of a new book, Sent Churches and Sending Churches. Well, I'll put the word "and" in there. I'm sorry, Ben. There's no "and." It's just a
not
comment.
offended. They work together well. So
Okay.
start
Hey,
over.
yeah, no editing. Before we
That's
talk
right.
about churches and sending, we always start with the same question here. For folks that don't know you, who are you, where are you, and how do you meet Jesus?
Yeah. Oh man, great questions. The last one especially. My name's Ben. I live in Fort Worth, Texas, with my wife and 3 kiddos. We get to do some foster care sometimes as well. And by God's grace, I get to be on the leadership team of a local church that we planted out of a previous church that I'd planted, and get to do some equipping with pastors and everyday Christians in different parts of the world. I thought that I was a Christian most of my growing up. Grew up in small town Texas. This is a very Texas story I'm about to tell. Grew up in small town Texas, very religious, very churched. I was a youth pastor starting at age 18, and 2 years into that, realized as much as I knew about Jesus and as much as I could teach kids about the Bible, I didn't actually know Jesus. And so that is the wrong order of things. But at age 20, it just hit me like a ton of bricks as I was walking across a college campus on a day with a lot of details that I won't share here. But what hit me like a ton of bricks was that if Jesus is real, he should matter to all of life. And I was definitely not living like he was real, because he did not matter to all of life. I think at that moment, the Lord revealed that as much as I knew about him, I didn't know him. So there we go.
Fell in
That's my
love.
story, coming to know Jesus.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
good.
Yeah.
Appreciate that. I'm sure there are so many that will listen to this and resonate with that deeply. Of I thought I knew this guy, but I didn't.
Yeah. It's cool. I saw it at seminary after that, in Bible school kind of stuff. Like I wasn't alone. There's a lot of religiosity out there, as folks who are listening to this and paying attention to this know. And in our unique mission field, that's a lot. It's part of why I wonder if God keeps me in Texas, is because I get this very religious, non-Christian culture, because I was that was me.
Yeah, for sure. I think the extension of that is we just keep meeting him as well.
Yes, for sure.
Understanding more and more of who he is.
Yeah.
So I had some questions teed up, because we're talking about your book, Sent Churches and Sending Churches, today. But I told you I might deviate. Here I am deviating. So I realized
Haven't even started. Can you deviate if you haven't started yet?
that's fair. I realized as you were sharing where you are currently, something important to highlight is you're writing a book about sending churches, understanding our identity as sent churches, but you're also a local church pastor who has also planted churches and has sent out churches. We should probably highlight that for a minute. Like, this is, you're not right in the same way that you shouldn't talk about Jesus if you haven't met him. You shouldn't talk about sending churches if you hadn't done it. So, like, what's your history there?
Yeah, that's a fair statement. I'm a big believer in, street cred matters, and doing the stuff that any of us are talking about doing. I looking back, I think we accidentally planted a church during that, initial first few years of ministry. I think this is after I was a Christian, so that's a good thing. But we kind of fell into a church plant during my university years. Didn't have any language for it, and then graduated from that, moved back to Fort Worth, and became part of a proper church planting team, something that was labeled a church plant for the first time. And so in the city where I live, I was on that team, and then we planted two churches out of that. And then from the churches that I've had the honor of serving, we've planted five churches out of those, and one of them has now planted a kind of granddaughter church for us. And then we've just gotten to work with different organizations, different denominations, to try to help their churches become sending churches as well. And so by proxy and by partnership, we've gotten to participate in the sending stories, the church planting stories of a couple hundred churches to varying degrees. And so most of the stuff that's in the book, since that's part of why you asked this, is true, hands-on learning, some the easy way and a lot the hard way of both what to do and what not to do as churches are trying to press into their role that God has in this vision for sending.
Love it, man. We should just highlight this. We've said the name of the book a couple times for those listening, because it's weirder for Ben to do it. You should go pick up Sent Churches and Sending Churches. I think you can find it at Amazon, but I know you can find it for free right now at exponential.org. If you look under the resources and then click on books, it's right there in the middle. So look that up, download it, engage it. So let's jump into the book, man. One of the things as I started reading it that I appreciate is that you ground the idea of what you're trying to communicate in the story of Scripture, and specifically at the church in Antioch. So, because people are, they already paused the podcast and went and downloaded the book. You don't need to retell the book, but like, why? Let's talk about Antioch for a minute. How that captured you, how that framed this up.
Yeah. Yeah, the Church of Antioch is such a beautiful picture that gets, this many verses in the New Testament. And so we don't have the plumb the depths of every detail and that kind of stuff. But what we do know is it was founded, first of all, by everyday followers of Jesus who were running for their lives. So they were facing persecution, and so they left their homes and ended up in Syria, where Antioch is. And so the first church planted outside of Jerusalem, so far as we have record of, was a group of everyday followers of Jesus coming into a new city, banding together and wanting to pursue God and pursue the welfare of the city where God had sent them. And there's just something very simple and ordinary about that. It almost runs counter to our very professionalized world of church planting kind of stuff that says, hey, here's the however many dozen checklist, step by step, and if you deviate from this, then you're not going to plant a church kind of mindset. It's just a bunch of everyday missionary people who were, frankly, not in a great position. Like they were exiles, and they were immigrants, and they were on the run and being persecuted. And that's the origin story for the first church outside of Jerusalem. So the first kind of, church plant outside of Jerusalem. That's one side of it. The other side of it is that both Roman Catholic, and by default we can also say most Protestant then, but most Roman Catholic traditions and most Eastern Orthodox traditions trace their roots back to this one church, Antioch. And no other church gets to say that in all of history. This was the first church that then intentionally we do see sent out Paul and Barnabas and others and this kind of stuff, and became a home base for sending. And essentially the majority of Christians in the world would trace their roots back to this one church. And there's just something about the two sides of that, the very ordinary everyday origins of the church at Antioch, and then truly the traditions that trace their lineage back to it, that is just astounding when we think of just a few ordinary folks starting massive movements.
Yeah, man, for sure. I'm thinking about what you're saying with the like part of their part of the ingredients that went into it was persecution, uh, fleeing a reality of suffering to some degree.
Yeah.
You're talking about sending Paul and Barnabas. There's a lot of ingredients in here. The prayer and the fasting, Acts 13, where they're praying over their people and then commissioning them out. Um, how do I ask this? What have we missed potentially? Is it a miss? Like, how should we recapture that, pay attention to it?
Yeah. Yeah, I think what strikes me as you're asking that, Brian, is there's something that we, I don't know if it's we miss or we pay attention to at least, uh, that is the question of legacy. And so, the church at Antioch, it doesn't exist. We draw this out in the book. I got to start 2026. We're recording this in February 26th. I got to start for a couple weeks in Turkey, and we went to Perge, which is another city that gets one mention in the Bible. Paul preaches in Perge before he goes to Antalya to take a ship home at the end of his first missionary journey. And our tour guide is a friend of mine who lives in Turkey, showed us in Perge this tiny little chapel this room that I'm in is probably 12 feet by 12 feet, 4 meters by 4 meters. I know you're global. I don't know if that's right. So, but essentially the ruins of this building in this ruins of a city, it wasn't much bigger than this. And there was a cross carved into a couple of the pillars within it. And so, he was honest. That wasn't the church that probably started when Paul was there, but it was from probably early second century or so. And that church doesn't exist anymore. The whole city is literally, like so many cities in the ancient world, in ruins. But it was similar enough to Antioch to remind me like that church doesn't exist anymore. And yet the legacy so far outlived that one single church. And it feels like for so many of us, the question is what is my church's legacy? And it's not the 400-year later view of it, or even the 40-year later view of it. So much of our focus and attention is what can I do in my city? What can my church's name do in my city? What can I as a pastor do uh, during this 4-year clip, or maybe this 40-year clip? And you asked if it was a miss. Our 4 years is going to be over. Our 40 years is going to be over. And yet the mission of God's going to be around in 400 years. So one of the things we do is kind of trace back. Like every church could do the ancestry.com thing and go, my church was planted by this church was planted by that church was planted by the one before it, kind of stuff. And most of those, we get 2 or 3 generations back, we don't know. Similar to like our actual great grandfathers and great grandmothers. But it's because they didn't decide they were the last in our family tree to have kids that I'm in existence today. It's in the same way, like some church had to decide we're going to send some folks out in order for your church to exist, my church to exist. And so I think there's something in there. The question that I would ask is like, what is our aim as it relates to legacy?
Man, that's good. I'm going to take a risk here and talk about my side of the story.
Please do. Yes.
So, one of the things that I also have the privilege of serving in Kansas City with a network of micro churches and disciple makers. One of the things that we highlight and just really push hard is see the church as an extended spiritual family. And then hold your imagination around that of like, what does it mean to spiritually mother and father? I think actually Aubrey talks about that in the introduction to the book, being a spiritual mother and father as
Yeah,
planting
that's right.
churches. I was moved by that. I was like, yeah. I recently, like my kid is doing a family tree thing right now. And we just did the deep dive and found out like my ancestors on my mom's side were the first settlers in New Jersey, and their kids started the first Baptist church in that area. And I was like, whoa, like something attached, to this history that was there. And there's some ugly stuff back in there too. It's like we're going through it, and I'm helping my kid go, hey, there's some good stuff and beautiful things, but there's some jacked up stuff back there too that we don't want to celebrate, that we should repent of as a family. Anyway.
Like Jersey Shore. Is that what you're talking about? Like they
Yeah.
quoted that?
I'm like deeply Southern now too. So
Yeah. Sorry,
uh,
you're being serious. I'm making light.
yeah. But there's as I was doing that with my son, it was like just what you're saying is coming up in me. That's like, if we see the church as his family, it is about like, I'm not looking at my kids going, cool, I tell my kids routinely the reason I run as much as I do is because I want to hold your grandkids,
Yeah.
not my like your grandkids. Like
Yeah, that's good.
I want to see how this goes. And it's just that long term posture. And like, man, if we would hold that as the church, there's a desire to multiply and to see it emerge in much different ways than like wrapping it up and holding it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Because if the name Brian or the name Ben is the name we care most about, then I'm not gonna equip someone else. Because like, what if they're better than I am at this stuff? And what if they're in the room when a light bulb comes on for someone? And what does that say about my identity, that I wasn't the one in the room when the light bulb comes on? And if that's the legacy that matters most, is me, just popped in my mind. I think Zach Eswine, he's near you, he's in St. Louis. He has this book called The Imperfect Pastor, and one of the questions of the book is, if Jesus could only be at one place at one time, in one place at one time with one group of people, why do we think we can be more than that?
Mm.
And
Yeah.
essentially, it's because we try to be omniscient, omnipresent, and
Yeah.
omnipotent. And again, it revolves around that same thing. Like, what is my view of myself as I get to serve a church? Is it that I get to be that? Because if so, Eswine would say, like, well, you're trying to be God, because only God is those things.
Yeah.
But if you're willing to right size your role, if I'm willing to right size my role, then, I've been doing this for 26 years, paid local church ministry, 24 of them a Christian. Um, and, and I probably got another about that long left in me. So then what?
Yeah.
Does the whole thing ride on my shoulders and it goes to my grave with me? Or have there been folks raised up and sent out, celebrated in their better than me gifting,
Mm.
for the sake of the longevity of the kingdom?
Yeah. Let's hold that, man. I hope people are putting that one into their bones. All right. So, one of the reasons this matters is because almost every leader listening, hopefully, wants to send. There's a desire to see multiplication. One of our desires at Hunter Movements is to think, how do we shift the imagination of the Western church toward movemental Christianity, not institutional, meaning like what you're saying, like it's not just rooted in a place. Let's see movement, multiplication, continual sending. So, from your experience, I'm sure you write about it. I haven't finished the book, Confession, working on it. What's the most common mistake that churches make when they're trying to like embrace this and send
Yeah.
leaders?
Yeah. There's lots of them. I've made lots of them. So I think that in my own experience, and also, yeah, no, you haven't made any. In my own experience, and I think the common mantra that creates the biggest tension in this, is trying to wait until we're something enough. Like maybe our church has to be a certain size before we can afford to lose or send some leaders. Or maybe we have to have a certain budget or a certain number of leaders to backfill, or we have to be something enough. And so we'll try to, like, I'll intentionally use this word to come back to it, but we'll try to storehouse enough things so that when we have excess, then we can send. And I think that's there's some theology there that goes, hey, when are we ever enough? Part of what we hold to is like, we're not enough. That's why we need Jesus. That's the message of Christianity. So the same would be true of our churches. But then one of my friends named Chris, who leads one of the larger churches in Fort Worth, we were in a room at his church, and a younger church, a smaller church, made that comment, like, well, maybe when we were, this church's size, then we could send. And really wisely, really gently, Chris goes, hey, like, we don't have this whole just excess of money just laying around doing nothing. Like, we don't have all these leaders we've trained who don't have a place to serve. Like, God's graced us. We're a little bit of a larger church in this season, but at the same time, like, it costs more, and we have more groups to lead, and so our leaders, we're raising up leaders and deploying them immediately. And so he goes, don't believe the lie that you'll ever get to a state of readiness. And I think that's one of the accidents, is we feel like we got to get, to this, whether it's edge of a cliff or pinnacle on the stairs or that kind of stuff, before we can send. I wonder if that's just to use Chris's term, a lie from the enemy that keeps us from ever doing it. Because we all know this, like, we get to the next phase and you're like, well, I still don't feel like I'm enough. So maybe it's tomorrow. Maybe it's tomorrow. Maybe it's tomorrow. I didn't feel ready to have my first kid, and yet my first kid came. I didn't know that I was ready to be married, and yet there we go. Like, and there's a little bit of the same thing. Like, what does readiness actually look like? And so I think there's some of that becomes a tension that keeps us from sending, is this kind of mantra of maybe one day will be whatever enough.
Yeah. I am just thinking about the story of Antioch. Like, I wonder what their questions were.
Yeah.
What put them in that Acts 13 moment of
Yeah.
fasting and praying? Like, I'm honestly, I'm just like, I don't know if I was there, if I would be like, yes, we should send Paul and Barnabas on a
Yeah.
journey
Right.
from which they never may return, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
And like, if you do the work, Barnabas is actually the voice for a while. Like, everybody thought he was the leader, not Paul.
Yeah. That's
And,
right. Yeah. He
you
was,
know,
he
and so
was, he was Zeus, and Paul was just his mouthpiece.
yeah, so
Yeah.
there's this sense of like Antioch looks at arguably two of their best leaders, and we're like, "Yep,
Hmm.
God said do it."
Yeah.
Like, what helps people? What helps you overcome the fear to go? I'm gonna
Yeah.
send the best leaders out.
Yeah. The fear was there. So I don't know if we overcame it.
Yeah,
And to your point,
we
I'll
should
bet if
not
I was at
diminish the
Antioch,
fear. Feel the
say it again.
feelings. I said
Yeah.
we
Yeah. Yeah.
shouldn't diminish the fear.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, yeah. If I was at Antioch, I'd be like, let's send those two. That'd be great if they actually go. Like, not Paul and Barnabas, but like Brian and Ben. It'd be fine. We'll be fine if they go. But Paul and Barnabas, let's hang on to them. Um, yeah, I think it was a place of conviction, um, that we were part of a couple organizations. One of them was overtly, and many organizations have used this tagline, but one of them was churches planting churches, and we hadn't. We were 5 years into a church and hadn't even thought about it. And so going, man, for both integrity's sake and convictionally, like, we believe we're not the last church that needs to be planted. Um, and so if we're gonna step into this, like, we got to step into it. And so it. I'm trying to pull a principle out. It had to start with heart, uh, and a really deep trust in the things we say we believe and preach. And kind of like the risk that we're asking you to take with your neighbors is the same risk we're going to put our money where our mouth is as a church. Might something go terribly if you try to engage your neighbors with the love of Jesus? Yeah, it might something go terribly if we send out a church? Yeah, it might. And Aubrey brought this out. You mentioned the forward for the book, and she talks about spiritual fathering and mothering. She's honest about the pain, and even that relationship that Paul uses of childbirth and labor and this kind of stuff. And we draw that out in the book a little bit as well, of just saying, it's the the baby at the end of the pain. I watched my wife go through this 3 times. She would go, the baby at the end of the pain made the pain worth it. But man, it was painful. And so I think it's the trust that there's something better on the other side is the only way to really press through that fear, and the loss that comes with sending some of your best.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think also just faithfulness to Jesus.
Yeah.
That stands out. Like, he said, "Go do this, go make disciples, and he will
Mhm.
build his church."
Yeah.
What would happen if we trusted him to actually do
Right.
what he said he would do?
Yeah. Yeah. And even if it meant like, we got to cut back on this ministry for the next season because all of its leaders left, like, is that, this is an impossible question for the sake of this podcast, but is that a need or a want? Is that ministry a need or a want? Like, this is how I would build my church. But if God is truly sending the leaders away and Jesus is the one who builds his church, then this is the convictional piece. Do I actually have enough trust in the things I say I believe?
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
some days the answer is yes. Some days the answer is not.
right. Some of this I would say also is like, I'm speaking somewhat from a different paradigm. I'm not saying that one is good, bad, right, wrong, or other. It's just like, as we work with microchurch leaders, we're also, when you said, I was taking notes a second ago when I looked down, churches planning churches, we hadn't thought about it for 5 years. Um, like, I've planted in both paradigms, the
Mm-hmm.
microchurch and the predominant model.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we also planted with a mindset of like, yeah, plant another one, like send out. Um, and there's something about going into it with that expectation. Like as like I'm writing this in our value statement, our mission statement, like this, put it up where I'll see it. And as we work with ordinary people, we're like, man, as soon as possible, you should be handing over leadership. The next question I'm going to ask you is like how to make this practical,
Mm.
how to make it concrete. Like, whether you're a church of 50, 150, or 500, whether you have a limited staff, a lot of staff, limited budget, excess budget. I do want to hear your answer. I'm just throwing one in real quick. Make them the glasses that you put on. It's like, I want to reproduce leaders that can do this with someone else and not need me.
Yeah.
Um, I know
100%.
I know you have a relationship with Jeff Vanderstelt, and we had him on the podcast, and that was one of the things we were talking about with disciple making. Just that idea that like I want to raise up people that are not dependent on me, in the same way that I want to raise my kids up and send them out to like flourish and thrive. Um, I feel like I'm sort of beating, my one note here, but I just really believe in it. It's like, how do we look at ordinary people and go, you can do this? It's not complicated.
Yeah. Yeah. And in some ways, this is adjacent to what you're saying. Like, we're never going to see everyday people start communities of faith, church expressions, whatever we want to talk about. If we're not also seeing everyday people passionate about making disciples. And so in some ways, even that, like, churches sending churches, like, we're all disciples making disciples, or are we? The same question could be asked. Like, has it been 5 years since we've thought about loving our neighbor? Has it been 5 years since we've share Jesus as if he actually sounds like good news in a culture where, most people who are claiming Jesus publicly don't look like they have very much good news to offer people. That kind of stuff. Like, if it's some of that same question, like, we know it all in our heads. Like, we know the theology, we know the charges, the commission, that kind of stuff. And yet it feels just as foreign to some people in some seasons and some traditions, all the things, all the disclaimers, to go like, hey, my everyday pursuit is making disciples, as it does for church leaders to say, hey, one of my everyday hopes and goals, vision statements. I love that you said that. My everyday lens is multiplying churches. So if you're asking like, how do we be practical,
Yeah. What's one?
make it that. Yeah.
Apart from
Yeah.
that, because you
Yeah.
could still, in some ways, make that a bit ethereal in theory. So
For sure. Yeah.
if we move it from theory into something concrete, and leaders are asking, like, all right, what's one realistic step that I could take, like our church could take, our leadership team could begin to
Yeah.
wrestle with, to
Yeah.
cultivate a culture of sending?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. So you mentioned Jeff, and we created a process called the Disciple Making Lab that runs under Saturate, Jeff's organization. And we actually do a little bit of a deep dive on culture, and so I'll mention all the aspects that we talk about, but I'll dive into one because I think it answers your question, hopefully. But one, like, what are the assessments that are defining success? What's the language that you're using? If everything talks about professionalism or that kind of stuff, what are the words that are informing beliefs? J.R. Woodward does a lot of good work on this stuff as well. What are some of the assumptions? Like, what determines whether you belong or not? And then narratives, like, what stories have shaped our shared history? What are the doctrines that are shaping our worldview? And so any of those things, as well as practices, like, what are you calling people to? So any of those things, like a little bit of shining a spotlight on, like, practices, for example, what do we do that calls people more inward, and keeps the few involved in the ministry and the many involved in consumerism, like doing a little compare contrast to, like, what are we actually asking for our folks? But I think maybe if there's a first step that any church can take, it really is around that assessment thing. Like, what do we celebrate? What do we tell people are the wins in order to be part of this organization? An organization can be, the 8-person small group or the 8,000 person megachurch. Because most of our inherited metrics. We might just call them input metrics. Um, and I wouldn't swing the pendulum so far as say those are all bad. Like, I need to know how much money I make to know what to do with it, kind of stuff. So like it's good for a church to know its budget. We can be this or that, but I think they're helpful. They're just not sufficient.
Mm.
And my wife works for a bakery, and I had a friend who said one time that most churches base success in the same way that a bakery would base success on the amount of goods that got delivered that morning. So like, look how many pounds of butter we got. We did it. It was a great day. Look how many pounds of sugar came through the door. We're amazing. Let's call it good. And it's a dumb analogy, but it sticks with me because it's so dumb. Obviously, that's not success for a bakery. It's what do you do with it when it's here, and then to intentionally spiritualize it. How are you sending it out the door?
Yeah.
And so I think just asking the questions, what are output metrics as well? Leaders trained, percentage of money given away, not just percentage of money coming in. We measure how many teenagers are serving within our church because we're not ready to quite send them out to start their own churches yet, but we want to instill in them that they have a place to serve. And percentage wise, we got more teens serving than adults serving, so we never use that as a guilt trip from the front weekly. Um, But yeah, what are we doing as far as raising up leaders? New groups started. Are we commissioning teachers at the start of the school year, not just new deacons as they step in and that kind of stuff? And if you really want to get very tangible and rub some people the wrong way, some of that starts with like, what's your membership commitment? Because if you tell people here's what it looks like to belong, if there's nothing in there that says you have a role to play, you're called to be a leader, you're called to use your gifts to serve, you're called to, I love what you said, like starting with the lens of as soon as we start, we're asking the question, who's next? If that's not baked into the thing we ask people to sign that says you believe or you belong here,
Yeah.
then it just seems like bonus. It seems like the optional A-team material that some people can choose to do, but I don't have to, because here's a commitment you asked me to sign, and it doesn't involve any of that.
Yeah.
So membership commitment, maybe the most tangible starting place for some of us.
Yeah. I mean, I think all of those. A language assessment to me is always so important. What are you saying that is continually reinforcing the narrative?
Yeah,
And
yeah,
that's one of the things that we've done. I think that's been helpful identity wise in Kansas City is to say, when you commit to being a part of the underground, we have a weird organization in that the underground is not the church. The churches are the micro churches, and a lot of people are a part of those that don't know about the underground. But if you commit to joining like the work in the city and that vision, we do ask people to sign something. And the first line says, I commit to be a disciple maker. It's like, okay.
yeah.
Like if
And
you
so what
sign,
you're telling them is literally there's no other lens that you can look through and belong here. That's the first lens, and so anything else becomes part of that. And that's
yeah,
just it's a paradigm shift from a lot of well-meaning traditions. So
yeah.
yeah, and like
Well,
Brian said, the book is free, but also we created some of these exercises to help church leadership teams, that kind of stuff, actually ask these questions. So I should know how to say these words. Sentchurches.com will get you some of those exercises if any of these would be helpful if you need help taking those tangible steps.
yeah. So sentchurches.com is a helpful place to jump into. We mentioned exponential.org. If you click the resources tab and then the books tab, you'll find the book. You can download it there for free. You can purchase it on Amazon. We got the equippinggroup.com. Did we mention that one?
Yeah,
We
that's
mentioned
the organization that we get to do some of our work under.
Yeah.
You can find me there. If any of this was helpful or you want to rebuke me outright, you can go to equippinggroup.com and send me a note.
Now, if you want to rebuke Ben, you email me. Uh, I'm on your side, bro. Let's just end with this, man. I'm grateful for your voice. I love hanging with you every time I get to, which is not nearly enough. We should figure
It
that
is
out.
not. We should do that
Uh,
more.
I'd love for you just to end with, maybe a bit of a pastoral tone, maybe a bit of just what the Spirit might even be right now speaking to you. When you write something, I haven't written. I haven't published something as long as what you've published, but I've been there and have done it. When you do that, there's like a sense of, I hope people hold this not for me, but for what Jesus might say to them because of what he said to me. So I want to clarify, like, I'm not asking you to do something because you're arrogant and you want to brag or whatever, but like in the humility that I know you wrote this with, like, what do you want to say to people that might read this?
Yeah, man. I think like where my mind goes is like it'd be the easiest thing to say. It'd be like, hey, for all the belief of like you're not enough. No, don't believe that. Like you are enough. Like this kind of cathartic, like you can do it, you know? But honestly, where my mind's going, this may be discouraging, not encouraging, is like there's a degree to which like you're right. You're not enough. I'm not enough. No church is big enough, smart enough, fast enough, rich enough, that kind of stuff to participate in this. In the same way that like no human is winsome enough or convincing enough to see a heart soften to come to know Jesus. Like we can't do that.
Mm.
And yet we get to serve a God who can and does both of those things and has throughout history and will continue to do so throughout history. And so on the one hand, like none of us are enough. But on the other hand, because of who he is, he's made us enough by his blood and in his power. So yeah, I think there's some hopefully freedom and breathing that comes with that.
Yeah. Amen. Ben, thanks for hanging, man. It's been a good
Yeah,
time together. We should do it again soon.
let's do it in person sometime.
uh, a,
Thank you
mo-
all.
a month away, hopefully.
Yeah, that's
All right,
right. That's
y'all.
true.
See you next time.